Today we're going to look at the rook, and the rook is one of the most powerful pieces that you'll come across. The rook is worth 5 pawns. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how the rook moves. The rook is going to move vertically and horizontally as many moves as he can. Now if there's a piece in his way, he's not going to be able to do that. So let's go ahead and put a piece in the way. Let's say there's a pawn here. Now instead of going the entire way, we can move all the way to a5, we can move all the way to h5, we can move all the way down to d1, but we can't move back to d8 like we could before. The only, as far as we can go, we can capture on d6, but we can't hop over pieces. The rook can go horizontally and vertically as long as there's no pieces in the way. As you can imagine, we want the rook to have as much space to roam as possible. So, if you look at a chessboard and you think about what's the best way for a rook to act, right now at the beginning of a chessboard, the rook has nowhere to move. Now let's go ahead and remove one of our pawns at the beginning. You can already tell right away our rook has a lot more room to move than theirs does. Now this is not to say that you should start your chess games without pawns. You never want to be down a material if you can't. Avoid it. But that is to say that the rook is always going to wants to be on open files. So let's say you have, an open file on, the C square. If you have, your C square, and let's say your setup is something like this. You have an open C file, meaning you don't have a pawn block. You now want to bring your rook to C1 because you want your rook to have as much line that he can travel as he can. Now obviously once we move our knight out of the way on C3, our rook's going to have a long horizontal vertical line that he can go. And this another thing you want to know about rooks is they are involved in castling, and castling is very important. One, because it gives you king safety, but two, it's the only time in chess where two pieces move. The king moves and the rook moves. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. Let's go ahead and look at this position right here. Castling looks like this. You can see right now our king is kind of out in the open, and we can castle either king side or queen side. And it looks like you move your king over twice, and your rook hops over. And that's one move right there. It's called castling. Or you can do queen side. You move over twice, and the rook hops over. Some people get confused and try to move their king over to b1, which is 3 moves. That's an illegal move. It's 2 spaces to each side. So either to g1 or to c1. It's called king side or queen side, or short side or long side. However you hear it, that's what it is. It's castling. Now there's 4 rules that you have to keep in mind when it comes to castling. The first one is none of the pieces can have moved before. So if you look at this position right here, the rooks have obviously moved since they started on h1 and a1. They've already moved, so there's no castling in this position. Even if the rooks move back to h1, you can't castle because they've already moved. As well as if your king moves, you can no longer castle. Another thing you want to look at is there a piece between? So if you look at the position with, let's say, a knight in between. Now, I know the knight starts on g1, but let's say there's a piece in between. You can't castle on this side. You can still castle queen side if you want. Let's see if I can have it let me here. That's white's move. You can still castle queen side, but you can't castle king side because there's a piece in the way. So that's the second one. The third one that you want to look at is if you're in check. Let's take a look at this position in castling. Let's say bishop moves bishop to b4. Now we're in check. Now we would like to castle queen side. Obviously we can't castle king side because our knight's in the way. But let's say we want to castle queen side. That would be awesome because we can, 1, get our rook into the game, and 2, put our king in safety. But we can't castle because we're in check. This is another thing you want to think about in chess. Now what we can do is we can play, let's say, c3, and then when the bishop moves, now we're no longer in check. Now we can castle queen side. This is something to think about. And the last and the fourth thing to think about when castling is, let's say instead of putting us in check, he plays a move like bishop to g4. Now he's not attacking our king, and if we castle, we're going to end up on c1, but our king is going to move through the d1. And since the d1 square is under attack, we cannot castle. Now what we can do here, kind of like before, is we can block that, and once he moves, now the d1 square is no longer under attack, and now we can castle. But if the square, we don't even have to be in check, and we don't even have to end up on a square that's under attack. If the square that we go through is under attack, we can't castle. So those are just some of the things that you want to think about with your rook. One, they're very helpful for castling, but two, you always want to have your rooks on open files so that they can move. If they're always trapped behind your pieces, it's really not going to be as valuable because they can't move around. And although they are worth 5 points, if they're always blocked, you're not going to get any benefit out of it. So hopefully you learned a lot from this and go out and use it in your own chess game.